Hello, everyone. Welcome to another installment of SBIFF Film Talk. My name is Audrey Arn, and I am joined here today by writer-director of Surrogate, Olivia Hamilton. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, of course. Why don't you start off by just giving us a bit of background about how this story came together, what your initial idea was, and what made you want to write this, all that good stuff.
This dark, twisted, weird film. It actually came through a relationship I had with Stephanie, the other actress. She and I were connected through mutual friends and both wanted to make something together and thought, oh, let's try writing something together. What are we both interested in? And both of us found that the topic we found we just were energized by was this idea of like friendship and female friendship and the sort of unspoken dynamics of it. And she was pregnant at the time when we were ideating, and we started thinking about like surrogacy as a perfect as a great device to show imbalance and sort of a great construct to build something around. And then we started just brainstorming, and then I remember I basically like took the pen and started just going down. I basically just wrote it. Like we were going to go back and forth and I couldn't stop. And I'm like, what do you think? And then she, at the time, she was like, this is too dark. Like she was pregnant and she was like, I don't feel like I want to work. And I was like, okay, no problem. And we kind of like put it away. And then like a year later, she'd given birth and she was like, so I'm kind of into that. So that's how it went from basically like something we were going to do together to like, because I guess I had come here with the script and I was like, I like your ideas, but I feel really strongly about going in this direction. So if you're happy to let me be like the writer, director and direct you, I'd love you to be the actress. So we kind of had to sort of shift, redefine our roles in our relationship. That's what we're making it.
So yeah, I'm curious too, because I know since you have yourself become a mother and gone through that process yourself, I'm so
I get why she didn't want to make it.
Yeah, right.
Can you tell us? It's funny when you're having a baby to imagine someone poisoning your baby in utero. So yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about I mean, there's so much to delve into with the relationship, which is great because they're, you know, these interesting female relationships. I think what you kind of are trying to capture there, and like we were just talking about before, you know, we went live, how we both personally have kind of experienced those sort of complicated, really close female friendships that they're powerful, and the various dynamics that kind of can come up in that, and how it can be this situation where you know, rewatching it, I thought of your character almost as, you know, there's the stereotype of this gold digging female, but it's like, well, what about what she's doing to her friends in a way, you know, that same, she's kind of leading the friendship on in a sense.
So yeah, you thought I was the only villain basically in the show.
Well, no. I mean,
okay, different people.
It was a toxic. Opinions. Yeah, it was. It's interesting.
I view them both as being sort of flawed and contributing to the unhealthiness.
Right.
But I think a lot of people share your opinion that my character's the bitch.
Well, she's happy to do it, you know, it's like she's a willing participant, right? You know, so it's clearly a toxic dynamic, but there's one that's more so the benefactor of the relationship,
right?
So I guess that dynamic is
for sure. And I find like that's, I mean, that happens on the micro. Like this was sort of an example of like, let's take it to the extreme. Someone's gonna like want to be your surrogate and you're like, okay. But it happens all the time, I find, in life, of like you have a friend that volunteers to pick you up at the airport, or like or you're the friend that volunteers. Like so this happens, I feel like, to me, like I'll go pick up a friend from the airport and then I'll go visit them in their city and they won't pick me up at the airport. It just doesn't even occur to them, and I feel so like hurt and devastated because they're not meeting me. But then I have to remind myself that like I volunteered to do that, and that may not be something that they do or want to do, and I'm setting up a next like that I have, that I'm part of that, basically, that it's not, you know, they're evil because they didn't just do exactly what I did for them, and that you kind of
Right.
have to own your own expectations in the relationship.
Well, and it can, I mean, I think if we want to be personal, if I reflect, I can think of my relationships where it's not uniform across. There's ones
Yeah,
where and it's just something about that
right,
person or something about the relationship. It feels natural to just want to give them things and help them out until at some point you have to reel it back in and say, are they just kind of taking advantage of me, or am I
right,
offering too much? But then
right,
there's other relationships where I think I'm kind of the harebrained one of the friendship, and they're just really organized, and they're the one that is like happily willing to kind of initiate, and you know,
totally.
so it's interesting that there's that it kind of depends on you know, and that I think is sort of what you're exploring here to a certain
Yeah.
extent.
Well, and it's funny because since I made it, I did this course on authentic relating
Hmm.
that to me was like, yes, if we could all learn to relate like honestly and authentically, then these dynamics, like, they don't need to necessarily exist. Because before I was just like, this is how it is. One person is like, you know, often wanting the relationship more or whatever, you know, but like that maybe there would have been a world in which um I don't know, it didn't have to get to such a like a
Yeah.
an emotional and terrible place. And yeah.
Well, it's, you know, when you say that, it's interesting. I think what it is, and probably why I thought of this like gold digger, you know, dynamic is it's an exchange relationship. Not that,
Yeah.
you know, and for the record, not that I think the gold digging woman, quote unquote, is a villain per se. Just
Right.
that sort of exchange based relationship is kind of what we're seeing in this, where it's like they're
Yeah.
not relating, they're exchanging.
They're
Um,
exchanging, they're not relating. That's interesting. I would actually like, I think a really good thought exercise is to like look at your relationships and be like, are any of them not in some form exchange based? Like,
hmm.
hopefully there's also that emotional connection where you're like, you know, you feel like really close with somebody, but even that is sort of an exchange, right? Like I'm like you
Hmm.
like I have friends where we're each other's therapists at times, and that's like intimacy and friendship, but that's also therapy. Like that's
Hmm.
something people
It's
pay for.
labor. It can be labor.
Labor,
Yeah.
exactly. It's free labor.
Right. Right.
um so yeah, I guess I think I feel like the I don't know. I think we tend to like really like I get kind of, you know, if a friend wants to borrow my wants to pay me to rent my car for a little bit. We have a second car that we don't use that much. I get really awkward about it because I'm like, you know, you can't pay me to I'll just take it, just use it for free. And then I'm like resentful that it needs service and that she didn't what, you know what I mean? Like, so I do
Yeah.
think that um I mean, even in my own work, I think I have some ways to go, and like just recognizing that it's okay to have there be like exchange.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, in a friendship. And that maybe Chrissy should have been like clearer with Liz. I'm so defensive of
Hmm.
my character, but should have been clearer of like her expectations in becoming the surrogate. Like
Right.
Liz definitely should have known. Like she knew what Chrissy wanted, but
Right.
she could have
Well,
been
and she's
clearer.
offering, she's selling what Liz isn't really interested in.
Right.
Right, with the decorations. And so what was that process like then? How did you kind of set that up with those two characters in the writing process and then with your character work? Did you guys discuss that sort of, or how what did that kind of look like?
Like where did the well, I guess like the characters literally fell out of the situation of she's my surrogate, like um what kind of person
Would offer that?
offers to be like, or just like I guess the idea like that is so generous, right? Like that's like the ultimate gift you can do to someone, to carry their child. So then we were like, okay, why would someone be so generous?
Mm,
Like as a friend. And it's like there's probably like a deep insecurity, like, you know, a deep desire in her that like, and that's why it's like, is it generous? Because she does have an expectation that she's
She has a
now,
need. Yeah, she's
that she's
right.
trying to get met by it. So it's like, so she's like, even the most extreme form of generosity in this case, yeah, she wants something out of it. She wants to
Mm,
be part of the crew. She wants to be the, best friends again. And this is her ticket. And this is, she wants the, the companionship and the closeness. So yeah, so that's how like, so we're like, okay, so that's Chrissy. And then like, what's the opposite of that? Like the person who's just like, um,
I don't
not
need that.
interested. I don't need that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also like you kind of get the desperation of a mother who you're like, what kind of mother wants, has a certain, someone who can't have
Yeah.
children and who's probably tried for a really long time and really wants like having, that's also an extreme thing to have someone
Mm,
else carry your child. So like,
yeah.
what does that character have? Like they have to just be so wanting a baby that they're almost like willing to go places that they, like, I'd sort of like to believe that like Liz, like there wouldn't be anything else Liz would go so far for, basically,
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
what feels like, maybe pushing Chrissy or using Chrissy or, that it's like, she's just so desperate. So like when a woman comes up and like talking to friends who've been had to try, having trouble having children, it's like the most devastating journey. And imagining
Right.
someone being like, I just sort of imagined Chrissy being like, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And then the moment of like, that's so weird. No, we can't. But like, then also like that conversation you'd have with your husband where you're like, I
Well,
mean,
she's
she's
offering. Yeah.
exactly like she's, and like, and I also can understand why like Liz probably didn't say, well, like, what are your expectations? Be clear what you, whatever, because Liz was
Mhm.
probably just like, okay,
Of
let's
course I'll
just
do
do
it.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then like you get to this point, this far
Mhm.
on the path where like you can imagine that like Liz is probably playing nice and trying and being like, and then
Mhm.
it's like getting worse and when she's just, because they're
Well,
so
that's
misaligned in their expectations. Like one of them expects the other person to like pick them up at the airport every day, and the other one's like, I don't do that. And
yeah,
just
right.
harder.
They're kind of living in these two worlds that are now I think that's what I like dramatically about the scene is you see that they're living and they're in two different worlds. And then they're trying to both kind of polite their way around it
Yeah.
until, and
So
I think,
common, I think,
oh
especially
yeah.
with female friends, is that we are like, I love that
Mhm.
verb, polite their way
Yeah,
around it. It's the opposite of authenticity. It's just,
right.
um, yeah, we're just taught, I guess, to avoid conflict.
Yeah, I think so much about the I mean, clearly Surrogate, it's such a female story and visually it's so pink. It's so overwhelmingly pink that
That's
it
all Chrissy. I
definitely
don't think Liz would have had a pink beauty.
no. No, but for us our impression it's just like, okay, whoa. Yeah, it's very much I mean, did you ever were there discussions about the gender role of or the dynamic of these two women in kind of a patriarchal society and what this relationship is there a male equivalent? Was there any kind of like thinking about it in terms of, you know, how this fits into the bigger I don't know, the bigger story about human connection. Um, if
That's a
that's a
really good
question.
question. I'm sure there's a male equivalent. I actually like one of the friends that comes to mind as we talk about our real experiences
Mm,
that is a male friend, where we had totally different expectations. There was also like a male female friendship dynamic, and I think there's also this dynamic in romantic relationships. But part of me, the first thing that came to mind when you said that, and I haven't thought about this deeply, but was
mm,
just like, are guys more open about using each other? Like, are they
mm,
maybe not politing around it in the same
yeah,
way that like that's actually something that um I don't know, like I can't picture this story with two guys because
yeah.
I feel like they would just be like, dude, why am I setting up your baby shower? Like you're just like help. You know what I mean? And then like I didn't want the baby shower. You want, like I feel like it
Right.
would maybe just be a bit more overt. I mean, that's probably like a stereotype, obviously, but
Yeah.
I do feel like there's the the politing around. That's like you hit on something with that. I think that's
Yeah.
what's sort of unique about female friends. And also like I picture these two girls as like I was in a sorority in college, and I know what like that culture is. And it's very much like we don't fight, but we do, you know what I mean? And like, you know,
Yeah.
you just it's just part of like the culture, I guess.
Yeah. You know, I think, yeah, there's that too. And you know what came to mind? I think in my mind, I think it's that males tend to be taught more what their value is, as like
Mm,
this, you know, if you're doing this, this is an asset, you can get paid, you know, that's kind of more taught to males traditionally, I think, than females kind of learn that later once we go into the workforce. It's not early on given to us. Um, just generalizing, but I think you would kind of agree that there tends to be more of an emphasis on the politeness and what you can do for others rather than what you can do, what your value is as far as you can do to others. It's more the emphasis on giving rather than
right.
getting in exchange. So I feel like that would maybe be something where the male dynamic is different, is that there's more of a consciousness about how they're exchanging, how they're helping each other,
And
versus with
maybe an
females we just
acceptance
kind
of
of,
it.
right,
Like
versus it's,
maybe we're as females, like yeah, like maybe we're not allowed to be transactional about being like, hey, I'm only having your baby so that we're best friends. Is that not your plan? Okay, well then let's not like,
yeah. And
yeah,
there's like a discouragement from being direct in that way, I
right,
think too, which is
right.
so interesting. um
I actually, yeah, it's funny. It's really, I feel like since now that we're talking about it, I'm like, oh, I'm remembering like younger friendships that I had that were so much more like this, because I really feel like, especially in the last couple of years in studying authentic relating, like I feel like I can say I don't have any close friends that are like that dynamic, but I, you know,
mhm.
it comes up, I think it comes up all the time in acquaintances, like
Mm,
in situations like that.
yeah, it's this is so we're like getting so deep and
Point psychology. Yeah, seriously. But no, this is what I love. I mean, like, this is why I made the film. Like, I feel like
Mhm.
some people are inspired by other filmmakers, by art. Like, I was very much inspired by like personal relationships and real situations that felt like there was a kernel that could be universal, that people could see their own.
Right. Well, that I think is just definitely a preference of an actor, of course,
Yeah,
too. Like
you're
that's,
right.
you know, you want to get into that.
People and for relationships, you're right.
Right. So then parlaying that and working, I mean, you did it all with this short, but it was your first time directing, right?
Yeah.
So what was that sort of like, and what was your approach then that you brought in, you know, with your emphasis being as an actor and writer and into the relationships? How did you then parlay that into doing the more technical and the bigger, I don't know, the work of a director, however you
Totally.
want to classify it?
Totally. I would say directing was the role that I was most intimidated by actually doing. Like,
Hmm.
I knew I could write it, I knew I could act in it, um, but I felt very underqualified, I guess. When, you know, like for thinking about things like cinematography, that was the piece that, or like the, you know, the elements of filmmaking that I had never studied. Um, But then I found like once I got into it, that having the sort of department heads or the people running, you know, that, oh, I wasn't actually responsible for, you know, everything. I could just
You can
um,
delegate.
delegate and like
Yeah.
and let the artists that I've brought on to be the cinematographer, Devin, you know, let him guide me in his opinions. I was surprised. I didn't really, you know, I thought, I was like, I don't know how to storyboard, you know? And then I sat down and I was like, well, I do know how I picture this looking, and then sort of started drawing. So it was very much like learning by doing. And I don't know how I feel. I think I didn't come away with it being like, I want to be a director. I didn't love some parts of directing. Um, and it was still like, it was an amazing experience for me actually, because I like came away from it with such a better understanding of like my role as an actor,
Hmm.
and having done the whole, you know, process and been the sort of at the helm and sitting in the edit and looking at what we had, and I could see, I was like, oh, I want options, you know. And then I'm like, okay, ding ding, as an actor, you know, like that's important. Like just, it was really, I think helpful to have done it, but I can't say I came away. I don't know. I think I'm open to directing, but I definitely prefer like producing, acting, and that's sort of
Mm,
the path I've continued down since.
yeah. What
But I'm
about
not, yeah.
writing though? The writing aspect, was that something you normally do, or?
So I did write some stuff since then. I wrote this TV pilot that I was pitching, and I made a bunch of like shorts that I directed, these like this FaceTiming with Mommy, which is also, I guess, a female relationship about a millennial, like it's about the codependency between um adult children and their parents,
Mm,
and just again based on my own relationship with my mother, and the fact that you'll spend an hour talking to your mother about like something as silly as what couch you should get, and like your mother cares, and then like, like I don't know, I call my, then we added a dad, and I call my dad for, there was a period, I'm coming out of it, but it used to be like, I can't figure out like what to do, like my health insurance is lapsing, like what do I, like the, like we're still children basically, but out of the nest. And so yeah, so I made that after, and I guess I was directing that, but and I loved writing those. But then yeah, I've taken a bit of a break from writing, honestly. I feel like because it's so hard having a baby and carving the time out to be uninterrupted. It's
mm,
great if you can like producing, I find, is actually totally doable with a young child. Like
mm.
I can hop on the phone and have the baby like playing down there and do 10 phone, like be feeding her out, like him, what did I say, her? But but it's really, I think for writing you need concentration and like
Yeah.
not interruption. So maybe I'll come back to that.
You know what? I've talked to enough mother filmmakers at this point
Yeah.
to I've heard that kind of, I think, consistently, and I sort of think that being a mother is sort of it plays to your skill set as a producer, or vice versa. It
Right.
sort of
You're
seems
in
that.
that headspace all the time. You're producing this person's
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
You're like, so then it's very easy to just stay in that world. Whereas yeah, writing, like you wanna, like for Surrogate, I went and did a retreat at Esalen for like a week. I can't do that now. I mean, maybe I could eventually once COVID goes away and we have childcare, I can get some freedom back, I think. But yeah, when you're really like birthing something as a pure artist, I feel like you need to be alone and to have lots of time and to have you really totally focused on it. Like with Surrogate, I was thinking about it, living it all the time. Every conversation was filtering through, and every, like,
Mm.
but yeah, when you have a baby, you're producing the baby. Your mind is always on that. So I mean, I know some women do it with young children, and I admire them because yeah, I know it's possible. You just have to get coverage and then carve out. But yeah,
Hmm.
hasn't found me yet, but maybe this
We'll get
conversation
there.
is going to reinvigorate.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, going back, I guess back to the relationship thing, something I wrote down and I thought was interesting to bring up too, like this other layer of the relationship. And I wondered if you had thought about, at the end, of course, your character said, as an out, says, "Oh, I love you." That was the whole thing. But it's it's interesting because that, I feel like that is a way to kind of read it potentially, or maybe that Chrissy has had there, it's there's a name for it. I think I've heard that um there's this thing where you can be romantically, there's a romantic relationship that doesn't necessarily have a physical attraction to it, and
Huh.
that sometimes you could look at, I think, particularly female relationships, but not any relationship, but you can, with some relationships there does seem to be a connection that has, in many ways, romantic qualities to it, has an intensity that mirrors a romantic relationship, but there's not that physical element, and there's not that formal romantic relationship. And it's interesting, I think, to look at Surrogate kind of potentially through that lens. And I was wondering if that entered your mind at all, or if that was part of it as well, is like, is there some kind of where is this intensity coming from? And
Totally. I mean,
yeah.
exactly like what you're saying. I think was what we were thinking, I guess Chrissy was coming from, of being like a little bit like in love, not romantically. That's it. Like we never thought of it as like this, like a lesbian romance, or like Chrissy wants to marry Liz. It's like she's obsessed in like in a way that's beyond traditional friendship. But I guess I would say that like I believe it's definitely like a spectrum,
Mm.
like, and some of your closest friends can be on that part that feels like maybe like borderline romantic. And I actually think um I think yeah, and I think that the dynamic of her carrying Liz's child, like
Yeah.
he
It's like, I
wants to
have
be
some
the
of you in
partner.
me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want like we're a couple, like an idea of just like we're partners, like
Mm.
we're a unit, and like and then what that means, and like what does it mean, like to, I guess that's like the stability of knowing that you've always got someone in the world, or you always have, your partner. And I think I mean if it's a mutual true feeling of like love in that way, I mean, like I actually think it's a beautiful thing, and
Oh,
it can
yeah.
exist kind of, and while you also have a romantic partner. There was a great talk I went to by the Esther Perel, and everyone knows who that is, right? Like the sort of the modern day Dr. Laura,
Mm.
Dr. Ruth, like the
Dr. Ruth.
sexologist of our generation. She has this whole thing where she talks about how, like, back in the day, it used to be, and I had just gone to her talks, it's probably running through my head, but back in the day, back in the day is this term we use for just like old time. Anyways, in the olden days, we all lived in like villages, and you would raise your child, and you would, play and get all these other parts of yourself fed by not just your romantic partner, but by like
Your
your friend,
community.
your community.
Yeah,
Exactly. And now
totally.
we all live in our own little houses, and we look to our spouse, or domestic partner as our everything. But I think, yeah, in the ideal world, we would probably each have a couple friends that we feel this like deeper love with. That's not
Yeah.
necessarily, I want to have sex with you, love, but just,
Yeah.
you
No, I
know,
love that. That's so interesting. I totally am of that mindset, I think, where it's like I think the majority of human history we survived by having these community dynamics. And it's only more recently in these modern times that have we changed that. It's the nuclear family, extended family doesn't live with us anymore as much like they used to. And that's so interesting. That's such a cool way of looking at this too, because in that light, then Chrissy's character is just starved for Liz is fine with that. That's probably perfect for her personality type, is it's,
right,
everything's where it needs to be. I've got
right,
this and we're good.
right,
But, Chrissy is someone that's, yeah, I mean, Liz is probably getting those needs met in her other ways, whereas Chrissy is someone
right,
that's deprived of that
right.
and looking for that for her
And
community.
like, yeah, that's her need. And she's exactly like, I think of Liz as having a lot of friends. And I don't know. I mean, Liz definitely, I feel like part of me does hope or wish, or like in a place where she was more evolved, like you'd almost would wish that she could like receive Chrissy's love, and like even if she didn't reciprocate it, just receive it, like
Right.
very,
Yeah.
because she's always pushing her away. She's always
Yeah.
like
Or
uh,
respect it or honor it at least versus
right,
like the
and
decoration.
appreciate it, and be
Yeah. Yeah.
like, you really, um but I feel like, and I feel like this happens a lot, is that like and actually maybe that there was a little part of me maybe that I put into Liz, in that I have a tendency, I think, when a friend, like I can get triggered if a friend is like calling me all the time, and they're like, we don't see each other enough, or like like just almost making it an accusation, or like a, like, not giving me space, basically like being too much. I
Mm.
can definitely sometimes like I feel like it's a very natural human reaction when someone is like, to be like no and go away.
Yeah.
But I think the more evolved response is to be like, you really want to spend more time with me, I see that. Or like to Chrissy, you're craving human attention. I see that. Like, here's what I can give to you.
Mhm.
And let me be upfront about that. And
Right.
it's not a
Versus, yeah.
reflection of you, or it's just, it's almost like a better version of what Liz tried to do on the couch. Like that was like the mean, not evolved,
Yeah.
no spiritual work version of that conversation. But like, there's a loving way, I think, to have that conversation of like, that I've tried to adapt to, I think, as well, instead of being like pushing away, just to be like, oh my, I feel that you're really wanting it, not, you know, because you get, when you feel attacked, you get defensive, and it's hard to just
Mhm.
like,
Well, it's an expectation,
yeah,
right? But it's coming, it's like we're not hanging out enough, then it's like a feeling of what do you want from me? No. And
right,
that's like a fight or flight that just is a shutdown.
right. I think it comes from like
Yeah.
when we're young and we feel like we all have a, I think, a bad reaction to being told that you're doing something wrong or that
Hmm.
you're not. And instead of, but like hearing it as you're doing something wrong, rather than hearing it as you have a need that I'm not meeting, that's upsetting you, I think is like the shift that
Mm.
one could make.
Yeah. You know, I just thought too, I remember that part where where your character's like virgin mimosa and it's just orange juice in a glass. And I think that, you know, that popped into my head and it's like it might be why everyone hates your character so much off the bat is or thinks you're the bad guys. It's like, come
Yeah.
on, the pregnant girl, you just give her orange
Giving her
juice.
orange juice. No, my character, I mean, it's like, it's a dark comedy. So I
Yeah.
think both characters, I feel like my character's the sort of villain in the beginning. And then I feel like it shifts when Chrissy goes
Yeah.
so
Well, it's
far
almost, you know, it's
crazy.
almost like a kid parent dynamic almost.
Right.
Cause even with the drawings that are kind of that are very DIY.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's so
Right.
funny.
Right.
Uh
You're right.
oh
Virgin mimosa while you're drinking. I mean, it's not very thoughtful. It's
yeah. And grab my credit card or what the
get my
workout.
credit card. Yeah, exactly. I'm on a flash sale. Like she's like running. Yeah. I know. Yeah, but I think it is like I do think that I hope I hope it wasn't entirely just like don't abuse your friends and take advantage of them. Like I really do feel like they're both contributing to the dynamic. And obviously we always look at like the abuser. That's who everybody looks at when they're like, stop doing that, you're taking advantage. But I
Right.
think that it's
Well,
more
there's
yeah, it's interesting to see the other side of it, that like she's enabling it too.
well, they're sort of triggering each other with exactly giving each other exactly what the other one does not want.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, I
So
think,
true.
yeah, that's the escalation there.
And in some ways it's like the only times the relationship like works and is clicking is when Chrissy is waiting on Liz. Like that's a dynamic that works for Liz and Chrissy seems to like too. And I feel like, yeah, in some like perverse way, I almost feel like there could be a conversation, you know, if they could be direct about it and they're like, that's when our relationship works. So why don't I just pay you? Or why don't I, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, do you want to work for me? Like this seems to be like, I don't know, you know what I mean? Like something um where you figure out like what works in the you know, you're honoring what it is and then not trying to make it something that it's not.
Right. Right. So I always like to ask everyone too, after making Surrogate and all of that, what's the wisdom that the overall wisdom that you gleaned from that experience that you would pass
Mm.
on to someone wanting to do something similar, or that maybe you would tell yourself going into the prod, you know, what's the good nugget of advice that came from working on this?
Don't forget about insurance for your camera. Oh, that's my like first thing. I'm sure I have a deeper thought, but like insurance.
Did
That hit me
something
like
happen
no, just
or
like 2 days before. It's like we had camera equipment insurance that was like our like a fifth of our budget. Like, you know what I mean? And I was just like, so that was one thing. Let me think. Other things I would glean. Um I feel like, um, I think that one of the biggest takeaways I had, like that I've applied elsewhere, is not to let the fear of having never done something tell you not that you can't do it. I think it's almost pretty default in Hollywood. It's almost like you're guilty until proven innocent kind of mentality. Like, well, you haven't directed, so you can't direct. And I feel like oftentimes, you know, if you're like an actor and you have an idea, then you're talking to your agent and they're like, let's find a writer to write this for you. But like, I think what I learned from the experience was even things where you're like, I have no idea how to direct. Like, you can just figure it out. You just do it. Like, it's, where there's a will, there's a way, I guess. So it's like leap, the net will appear. I mean, these are all platitudes, but that's like, like the deeper wisdom I have is just like, you only can't do it until you've done it. So just do it, you know? And like, if you keep your budget relatively low, then like, there's not that huge of a risk. And yeah.
Awesome. And then since Surrogate, I know you were in First Man. You were great in First Man. Where else can people find you, and what do you have kind of coming up? And
so it's funny, I shot a short this past fall, or like a year ago when I was pregnant, called Private Room, I think, or Private Viewing. It's like annoying because it came out recently, right during COVID, so it didn't. I don't know if it's gonna wait a year to be doing festivals or not, but I shot it when I was pregnant. I played a pregnant woman. I don't want to give it away, but it's also similarly goes to a very dark place. Not at all not like in the baby gets injured, but like, so that's something. And then
that's your karma from having made your pregnant friend have to do
my karma. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And then I forget if it was before or after Surrogate. I did this indie Hold Fast Good Luck, that I think is accessible. And then I did a Christmas movie that just got put on Amazon. And then I might be shooting something this summer, working out the details. So yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you, Olivia, again, so much for joining us and chatting. And yeah, thanks so much.
And thank you for getting me out of sweats for a night. You know, it's good to put on some real clothes. And
you could have worn sweats anyway, but
no,
might as well take the excuse. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm glad you.
Jewelry.
Perfect. Yeah. Nice to have a reason.
So good night chatting with you.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Have a good night.
Bye.